Hey, everybody, thanks for sticking around. We are here with the director of the Sparks Brothers, our good friend, Edgar Wright. Hi, Edgar.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I missed the Aero desperately. I can't wait to get back.
And on behalf of everyone, it's an amazing documentary. It's so dynamic and it speeds along. Uh, what I'm curious about is I think it plays well for anyone who's a huge Sparks fan or anyone that doesn't even know the Sparks. So can you talk a little bit about constructing the film for both audiences?
No, I think when I pitched the documentary, I mean, to get it financed and stuff, the big thing that I said is like it is an introduction as much as it's a celebration, because there are a lot of people out there that don't know who Sparks are, and this isn't like a way to educate them. So I think a lot of music documentaries assume prior knowledge of the band, and sometimes that can be kind of like a bit like a sort of gatekeeper thing where it's like people say for fans only. And I really didn't want to do that, because I wanted people, the whole point of making the movie is I wanted more people to be Sparks fans. So in that sense, it was really important to kind of like let people fall in love with them, not just them as people, but actually hear the songs. So I did kind of like, in the running time, I sort of made time for you to kind of hear different songs, because that was important. I feel like I just wanted I wanted to kind of convert people. That was basically the idea. So doing something that would be for fans only was not the option.
And there's so much music. So if you think some people, I knew the Sparks in like a disco era and a techno era. I didn't know all of it. So you let so much music play out. Was that by choice, and was it difficult to get the music, all of it?
It wasn't difficult to get the music because Sparks are involved in the movie, and they obviously want everybody to hear it as well. So clearing Sparks tracks was not an issue. I think the thing was more that I wanted to cover the whole discography. And the reason why I wanted to do that is it would be disingenuous to skip over the failures. In a way, the failures are as important as the successes in a Sparks story, because they don't have that traditional rise and fall and rise again. Their career is going like this, like a series of left turns for 50 years. I feel like in a way, like in this kind of century, since 2003's Little Beethoven, they've achieved a kind of equilibrium where they just let the audience come to them. Like, I mean, they're not a band really that are thinking about market forces too much anyway. But really, what's interesting to me is even the kind of like albums that seem like they didn't kind of make any dent on the zeitgeist at the time, they have their fans. And like, Ron and Russell were really like overwhelmed to see Flea talking at length about introducing Sparks, which is probably one of the lesser known Sparks albums. So it was important to me to kind of like cover every like release, because in that way you're telling like the whole 50-year journey. And the fact that they never stopped operating as a band, there's obviously a little break in the late 80s, early 90s when they were trying to make the Tim Burton film, but it's not like they ever disbanded and came back. They've been a going concern for 50 years.
When you were putting together the arc of the story, it's up, down, up, down. Was the Leos Carax nice button there, because it ties in so well with Jacques Tati early on? You're like,
No, well, here's the thing. When I first met Sparks in 2015, when we first had coffee, after I discovered, after 40 years of being a fan, that they were following me on Twitter, I was like, wait, what? And within 32 hours, I was having a coffee with them at Russell's house, not like 10 minutes from the theater. And back then in 2015, when I first met them, they said, hey, keep this under your hat, because it's something that hopefully will happen. We've got our fingers tightly crossed that Leos Carax might be making like a film of one of our albums. So they had written this album, Annette. They intended to release it. They met Leos Carax and he asked them what they were working on. They talked about this concept album and he said, oh, let me listen to it. And then he emailed them and said, I want to make a film of this. So this is in 2015. And so it was when we went into production on the Sparks Brothers, Annette was not definitely happening. Like there was some casting in place, but it wasn't definitely happening. And even I think it was when I was actually finished shooting the documentary and I was shooting Last Night in Soho, we knew that Annette was going ahead. So I was like, we have to go to Brussels and shoot on the set of Annette, because you're right. It's like, I think if I didn't have that button, the B plot would be a real bummer. It's like they tried to get some movies made and it didn't happen. But now the ultimate kind of the ultimate um, good news out of that is that Sparks have 2 films in 2021 after 50 years of trying. I mean, it is, like you said, it's very apt that Leos Carax is the man who finally made the Sparks narrative movie, given that Jack Tati was the first.
Hey, the interviews are fantastically woven in, and you did them, correct? And to each person?
Yeah, I did like 80 interviews. And I was in the room with all of them except for Jane Weedlin, who I had to do by remote, but it was still like we set it up and had a film crew there so it could look like the rest of the movie. I mean, I really wanted all of the interviews to look the same because I wanted to kind of create an equivalence between Nick Rhodes and John Taylor from Duran Duran and Julia Marcus, a lady who jumped on stage when she was 12 years old, that it was important to sort of, you know, kind of make all the fans one and the same, and all the, you know, that no story was more or less important than others. And as such, that was something where we sort of had to get people to come to a studio to shoot the movie. It wasn't something where I wanted to shoot people in their houses or do any of that. So that was probably the biggest challenge of the film, beyond clearing all of the archive. The biggest challenge of the film was just getting the people who wanted to talk about it into the filming slots that we had. And we filmed in like London and New York and Los Angeles. And then with the band, I went to Tokyo and Mexico City as well, which was extraordinary.
How did you discover who, like both Steve Jones and Mike Myers are Sparks? How did you discover who the big Sparks fans are?
Well, there was 2 approaches. One was that there were people who were on record as being fans, who were kind of like noted Sparks fans, and that would include like Steve Jones and New Order and like Chris Difford from Squeeze or Vince Clarke. And then there was a sort of the second category. It was more of my wild card ideas, where I basically guessed that people were Sparks fans, and like 4 out of 5 times I was correct. So it'd be like Neil Gaiman, Beck, Flea, Fred Armisen, Mike Myers, where I'd be like, you like Sparks, right? And I was often pleasantly surprised. And so I just, it's that thing, I guess it's the same in terms of like, when you have people that share your sensibilities in humor as well as music, you just assume that they must be a fan. And I was often right.
And it seems like the film is patterned off of the Sparks. Like you have animation for a bit, and then the animation disappears, and you try different things, and then it goes away for the rest of the film, much like Sparks' Library. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think also Sparks as a subject matter was such a gift because Ron and Russell have such a strong aesthetics sense, because Russell studied film at UCLA, Ron studied graphics at UCLA, and that is a huge part of who they are beyond the music, in the album covers and in the videos and even in the stage performances. And they've done like album covers that have kind of art, and they have like kind of animated album covers, animated videos as well. In fact, one of the animators who did the Edith Piaf video, Joseph Wallace, he did the stop motion animation for a lot of the movie.
Edgar, what was it like to get to meet your heroes as people that enjoy coffee and Japanese gambling games, as well as actually being the Sparks?
I think it's the thing, like they were worried at one point. Russell jokingly said, do you think that our real lives are too boring to be in a music documentary? And I was like, I think it's the opposite. I think that the way that they operate is like an Albert Einstein thing, where Einstein would eat the same lunch every day and wear the same suit every day, so that all of his mental energy goes into his work. And I think Ron and Russell do the same thing. And in a weird way, they're more weird by being more normal as rock stars. And that's the kind of the joy of it. In the like, and I knew that before I started filming, because I'd known them for like 2 years before I started filming, and I'd never really seen Ron and Russell off the clock. There was that thing where they say in the documentary that the line between Sparks and Ron and Russell is permanently blurred. And that is because they've sort of dedicated themselves to the cause of Sparks for like over 50 years. It's kind of extraordinary.
Thank you for joining us, Edgar. It's a wonderful, dynamic film. We hope to see Last Night in Soho here at the Aero Theatre, as well as the Sparks Brothers Annette coming out.
Yeah, I hope to be there in person when I next see you guys.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks very much. Lots of love to everybody at the American Cinematheque and the Aero. Hope to see you soon.